You are watching How to Conduct a Successful Teleconference in the PDU podcast series. I am Cornelius Fichtner and your presenter is Gene Dutz. Here are once again the 6 modules that make up this particular webinar. We've looked at hard tools, we've looked at time management, and now Gene will be moving on to content. And we've heard a little bit about content already in time management when Gene mentioned how important it is to fit your content to the time that you actually have.
Content. What is content? It's the subject matter or information slices selected, resolved, or deferred for or during the conference. Generally, there are 2 basic reasons that you convene a teleconference. Either it's an informational meeting that requires Q&A by the participants, or problem resolution that needs input and decisions by the participants. The teleconference is an active participation event. If it wasn't that, then you could do everything with an email or over a website with just information that people could access.
And as always at the beginning of a new module, here are the learning goals, Gene.
Yes, the learning goals. How content is the reason for the teleconference. How agenda is another name for content. How providing the right agenda assures the participants this meeting will be time well spent. And how an agenda enhances your leadership skills. Now, content is fitted to time, and frankly, I think the funnel is a very good example of that. You have a lot of time, but you have to fit it into a particular situation. So, if you're going to have major items, you need to limit them to your time. If it's daily that you're meeting, then maybe 1 or 2 items would be covered. If it's weekly, it could be 1, 2, or 3 items. And monthly, that's a much broader situation, so you can have 3 or 4 items that you're going to be covering. Now, as far as ad hoc is concerned, it's only 1 item.
Right, those would be the fire drill meetings or things that just come up now, we have to meet right now.
Anything that has to be, you got to meet right away. Ad hoc, by definition, it's 1 thing that you need to cover.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And then as far as minor items that you want to discuss, you fit those in. Even in a daily, weekly, or monthly, you'll fit them in. And by minor, I mean maybe a few minutes to discuss something or mention something. It's really as time permits. And then as far as ad hoc is concerned, none.
Well, yeah, because in an ad hoc meeting you have a particular reason why you've brought everybody together right this very second, and then you're not just going to throw in and, oh, by the way, it's also Joe's birthday tomorrow, so that wouldn't work.
No, and you want everybody to focus on that problem.
Yeah.
And that's why you call the ad hoc meeting. Good content management comes by targeting your content, and you do that by soliciting from team members what needs to be covered or what they would like to be covered. You develop that yourself. There's certain things that you want to cover. You have the team members submit the content that they would like to have covered in the meeting. You also might have carryover from a prior teleconference. And in some situations, the content is triggered by a project development. Suddenly, there's the goals have been changed as far as the project is concerned.
Yeah, that would be an ad hoc meeting usually.
Yeah. Normally, that would be an ad hoc meeting because it is an event.
Right.
And then you might also have management might be requesting certain things be covered, so you would put that in. And once again, influenced by outside events. Say you normally have a meeting in a particular building, and then suddenly that building, all the power has gone off. And so you got to figure out, well, what are we going to do now? And then, as mentioned earlier, content can be generated from the teleconference itself. It's very important to stay on track during the teleconference. I realize it's tough to do, but it's extremely important, because whenever the conversation veers off the content, off the agenda, then you're starting to lose your audience. So you need to acknowledge and bring everybody back to, this is what we're covering. That's a great idea, Joe, but today we really need to look at why the costs are increasing so rapidly.
Yeah, and interesting enough, it's always Joe.
That's true. Joe's a friend of mine. And no, whatever, you really want to stay on track. It's extremely important. Otherwise, you won't be managing your time, you won't be getting the content, and you're going to be at a loss. The next, as far as content is concerned, you can defer content, assign content, and then there's ad hoc content. Assigned content would be, this is the agenda, this is what we were going to do, we're going to move forward on it. Defer, there might be some items that you'll say, let's take this up on a later teleconference. And then there might be some that you're going to defer, but you're only going to defer until later that afternoon or the next day, because you need to address it right away, and that would be an ad hoc content. Reconsider the item options during the meeting. Your objective is to complete all the items, but if you can't, then you will defer some. You really want to focus on the important ones. And if something appears to be taking a little bit longer than it should, then that's a candidate for a deferral at a later time. You can cover all the items, of course, but then you might have to extend the time. If you're going to do that, you need a consensus that that's something that can be done, but there might be some limits. There might be people that can't stay on the meeting, or the resource that you're using, you might only be allocated for that period of time. And then there are some items that you'll just want to table, that they're really not that important, and in the interest of time as well as content, you will set them aside and focus on the ones that are far more important. And every so often, there will be an unexpected item. Suddenly someone that's a major participant becomes ill during the teleconference and has to leave. Well, you make a decision. Well, do we continue or do we defer? You probably would want to defer if that individual was really critical, especially if it's for certain decisions. So that's something to consider, and it can be any type of unexpected event. You want to demonstrate your leadership. That's why the content is one of the important ingredients. You want to make sure that the participants that need to be there are there, because the content that you're going to be discussing is their response, their input, their decisions need to be made on that content. So be very selective on the content. If you don't think it's necessary, then leave it out. Better to cover it at a later date than to spend time on something that's really, for that particular teleconference, meaningless. So once again, demonstrate your leadership. In essence, be an editor and make sure that the content, as much as possible, is going to be what that audience is expecting.
This slide here is titled State Decisions. What do you mean by that?
Well, Cornelius, what I mean is that any decisions that are made, you want to make sure that everybody understands them. These are the deliverables. These are the due dates. And by the way, these are the people responsible for the deliverables. You want to make sure that everybody understands who's responsible for what in the teleconference. It's a little more difficult because, once again, you're not right across the table from one another. And that's why it's important to state this information. And then as far as the issues are concerned, whether it's a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting, an ad hoc meeting, it doesn't matter. Certain decisions have been made, and you want to make sure that everybody is clear on the decision And not only that, once again, who's responsible for that and when is it due? And in a teleconference, like I said, it's a little more difficult, but through reiteration, it'll sink in. Everybody will understand.
And I think it's especially important on an ad hoc meeting. I mean, in a weekly and a monthly meeting, you can always go back to the deliverables, due days, person responsible. But if you have an ad hoc meeting, maybe even with people attending that are not usually attending your regular meetings, you want to make sure that the person knows, hey, you're on the hook for this one. You're going to have to take care of this, and I trust that you will do it, because this is an ad hoc meeting. We won't be coming back again and again and check up on you. This ball now is in your court.
Very, very important, and I'm glad you brought that up, because once again, the ad hoc, like you said, it was brought on right, today, this instant, in the morning, whatever, and it was brought together because a decision had to be made. Very important, and you want to make sure that everybody understands what the decision is and who's responsible for it and when it's due. And especially in an ad hoc meeting, you don't have the luxury of a lot of time. That's why it's ad hoc.
Now that we know these decisions, you say we also have to disseminate them, right? What do you mean by disseminate? Let's take a look at that word quickly for people whose first language is not English. What does disseminate mean and stand for?
Disseminate means get it out. Make sure that everybody is aware of this is the decision. And generally, the best way to do that is through an email. The next would be, an email with an attachment. You're making sure that the decisions with the responsible person and the due dates are being sent out to everybody, so everyone is aware of who is responsible for what. You can use instant messaging if you want, but the problem with that is you can't archive it, and it's not generally the best approach to making sure that everybody understands what the message is, and if there's a question about it later on, you can always go back and find out who's responsible for what. Also, the phone, you can do that, but normally it's a one-person thing, and also it's difficult to archive. So the last two are usable. They're really not the best. The best is, say, via an email or on a website. You can do a posting on the website, and it depends on how you use your website. If you have certain portals where you can go and access information, it's resident there. You can look at the minutes. You can bring up, in some cases, recording. Sometimes teleconferences are recorded, and you can access that information at a later date.
Right, but it's very difficult because here we're talking about disseminating the decisions that were made, and if you just archive, of course, the recording of the teleconference, then you have everything, and you have to sift through all the, the talking throughout the conference before you will get to those decisions. So somebody really has to keep track of decisions, make a note of them, and, then disseminate them and send them. And
send them and get them out. And in today's environment, I really think this is an advantage with email, that it's instantaneous, and then in fact, if the decision, if there's been an understanding, you're going to get immediate feedback. So Larry, instead of Joe, is going to say, wait a minute, this wasn't assigned to me, this was assigned to Ethel. So it's important. It's important to get it out, because then there's a record. So be sure to get out, i.e. disseminate your decisions.
We're nearing the end of this module. That means we're looking at the trilogy of the last 3 slides here: benefits, tips, and take action. Gene, what are the benefits of the content?
Well, the number one benefit is that you know that everyone is on the same page, that the items have been addressed, decisions stated, responsibilities assigned. Everybody in the teleconference is aware of that. And what this does for you as the project manager is that it does strengthen your leadership skills, because people come away saying, this is a productive meeting. I know what I need to do, and I know what my deliverable is, when it's due, and I also know when Mary's is due. And this is extremely important. And it also states that time is very valuable. And that's why you go through this process, through this procedure, where everybody knows what it is that they have to do, when they have to do it. And you're imparting on your participants, as a leader, I value your time, so I want to make sure you understand what I expect from you.
What are your tips when it comes to content?
Well, the tips for content are fairly simple, straightforward, and they are: make sure the content requires the participant's attention. If it doesn't require the participant's attention, then why is the participant there?
Nothing more boring than being on a teleconference and there for an hour they're talking about something that doesn't interest you. What are you going to do? You're going to start checking your email.
Checking your email, and then you're also going to remember the next time this person calls for a teleconference, I want to make sure that they're going to cover the material, or I might decide I'll get it through an email. I'm not really going to participate. I'll wait until the decisions are made. So really make sure that the content requires the participant's attention. And then second, always publish the decisions. This is, once again, my famous no-brainer, but it's very important that any decisions that are made are published, because if you don't do that, then later on there can be some discussion, let's call it, as to whether or not I was assigned that and that was my deliverable. I didn't understand that. Maybe I didn't get that was what you were assigning to me. Once it's published, everybody knows, and in fact, if a mistake is made, then you can be alerted to that and you can correct it. So always publish your decisions.
Right, and let's also mention here that you're not telling us the format of how we are supposed to be publishing these decisions. In many places it could be minutes, it could be you could input these things into a risk log. You've given us a few technologies there. You said email and website and instant messaging, but that's technology. But the format is really left up to how we manage our project, where we maintain these decisions, and how we keep track of these things.
Very much so. It's whatever the guidelines are within your organization, that's what you want to follow. And they might have specific requirements for publishing decisions, and you want to do that. Maybe there's a repository where all decisions need to be placed. Be sure you put it there. So it's really, really important. Now it's time to take action. To create better content, read Death by Meeting, a Leadership Fable. An excellent source. And in particular, there's problem number 2, lack of contextual structure. What you want to cover. It's very clear in setting that up and giving you guidelines. The next is a video conferencing, which is really quite helpful. Smart Video Conferencing, New Habits for Virtual Meetings. It's a book, Chapter 9, Interesting Agendas. So how to put together an agenda. Once again, the content, and how to make sure that it really targets your audience. Both resources are just very, very good, and they'll help you improve the agenda. And then also I have a Complete the Agenda worksheet, which once again is a guide. So take a few minutes, read the material, and then look at the agenda worksheet and implement it. And it's always helpful to, after you go through and fill out the worksheet, then to go back and reanalyze what it is that you have done in the next meeting or should be doing in the next meeting. It's a guide. It's to help you improve and get better at taking action.